Aloha, friends and neighbors. Welcome to show 877. 877 weeks I've served you. We're going to cover the last week in September 2013. Shame to the age we live in, said Ben Franklin, for ignoring astrology. And it's kind of my theme today. This is an Astrolab. Well, this is a cheap copy in brass. I didn't have any brass, so I would have shined it up for you. But they made these of gold in Alexandria. I want to talk about Jesus today. I loved the man. I read him again and again when I was young. Parents came from Iowa. They were Lutheran. I remember my mother saying she was afraid she was going to hell because she smoked cigarettes behind the barn when she was little. Moby Dick was a whale of an astrologer. His name was Don Jacobs. He was a friend of mine. In the old days, 30 years ago, there were three of us in Honolulu. Susan Ayu, Moby Dick, whose real name was Don Jacobs, and myself. We were all doing professional astrology. Now, Moby was originally a Baptist minister. He got into astrology to debunk it, and then he got converted. And then he made it his life's work to discover the horoscope, the chart of Jesus Christ. And after Moby died, which is another story, but I kind of took up that quest. Now, we had arguments about this, Moby and I, because he thought Jesus was a Pisces. Of course, Moby had sun, moon, rising sign in Pisces. He was a heck of a Pisces, being a Baptist minister. And I didn't always agree with Moby, but he taught me a lot. He was one of the first to get a hold of a program in a personal computer that could go way back 2,000-3,000 years and do accurate charts. And he started researching. He discovered the Mogan David. The Star of David was originally King David's chart. He discovered that on the flag of Israel, six-pointed star. He also discovered that Muhammad's enlightenment happened with the moon conjunct Venus exactly. Hence you see the moon and that star on all of the Islamic countries' flags. And when he went after the chart of Jesus, he wound up, in 7 BC, which was proper. And we had a lot of discussions about it. He maintained that Jesus' sun was in Pisces. I said, no, the sun is the father in your chart. Okay, you are the rising sign. Your character is the sun sign. You get that from your father, how you go about doing things. Your moon sign is personality, your face. You copy that from your mother. So Jesus' father was a carpenter. It wasn't any wood in the religious area of the world. They had long since chopped down all the trees. There was no wood, no paper. So Jesus' father was probably not a carpenter, but a stonemason. Anyway, I figured the sun would have to be in Aries to do that kind of physical work. But I'm getting ahead of myself. What I wish to present to you today is my theory of Jesus, and a lot of Moby Dick's work is kind of involved in it. First, let's talk about the three wise men. The three wise men were astrologers. Moby knew their names and what countries they came from. He had done his research. He also taught me that King James had gone through the Bible and culled out all the astrology. And religious people are really afraid of astrology like they are of science. And astrology is the base science. And so it could be very destructive if you're on a belief system with Neptune. What we're talking about here is Neptune and Uranus. two very interesting planets because, you know, they're just discovered here 150 years ago, and astrologers haven't really understood them really well, but they're like Saturn and Jupiter. They're a pair. Mars and Venus are a pair. Uranus and Neptune are a pair. Neptune has to do with Pisces, and that's the religious side of things. Uranus has to do with science and higher mental stuff. That's astrology. Well, back to Jesus. Along came these three astrologers who had a lot of money from different countries and saved Jesus and gave him portable property, Moby said, which was the gold and the myrrh and the frankincense. Very portable, little small things you could carry, and you could trade them for things anywhere in the world. And the three guys got Jesus out of town, found him a place where he could be raised in quiet. And then most folks think they just went away. And I would argue that point. These guys went to a lot of trouble and expense and traveled a long distance to find this boy, this baby, who was so important to the world. They're not going to just give him gold, frankincense, and myrrh and take off. Nah, that's King James Bible stuff. You see, Jesus was raised in an area that was just a hop, skip, and a jump from Alexandria. Alexandria was the seat of the great library, the most important library in the world. It held all of the ancient knowledge of the Greeks and the Babylonians and etc. And they're very involved in astrology. Now, in those days, if you wanted a really top education, you went to Alexandria. If you're going to go take your PhD at the university in Alexandria, it cost a lot of money and took some time. And when you came out of there, you came out with a gold astrolabe. These are made of gold. And you got hanging around your neck, and you could do charts on it. You could find out where all the planets were. If you watch the History Channel, you'll find the Antikythera mechanism was discovered not so long ago, and as a box, and it had about over 100 gears in it, and you could dial in any date, and it would give you the chart of that date. Yes, a modern computer, only it was done with gears. And this is 2,000-3,000 years old. So astrology had already had 2,000 years in the age of Aries to mature, and the average Roman soldier knew his chart. And 1,000 years of peace can't be laughed at. Of course, the Christians would make you think that the Romans were savages. The Greeks said the Romans were primitive because they drank their wine straight. A Greek would cut his wine half with water to get it down to 3-4% alcohol. More civilized and healthy. Anyway, Moby taught me, for instance, that if you go back through the Greek to the Aramaic, and Moby studied those languages, the word heavens in the Bible turns into sky. So what Jesus said was, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in the sky." He's talking to Father, the Son in the sky, and his will would be done on earth as it is in the sky where the planets were. As above, so below. Okay, so what happens next is that Jesus comes of age, and the three rich astrologers bankroll him an education in Alexandria. He could walk there from his house. His home is a rich. So he goes to school in Alexandria. And when you get your PhD out of that wonderful higher learning institute, you came out with the 7 sacred sciences. There was medicine, hence Jesus knew a lot about curing. Medicine, history, mathematics. There was astrology. Astrology was one of the 7 sacred sciences. And so if you came out with the PhD from Alexandria, you were a very good astrologer. Jesus had these missing years in his life. Where was he? He was in Alexandria. When he came out, he knew history, medicine, mathematics. You couldn't fool him. Astrology. So he came out with a lot of authority and went and confronted the religious powers of the time, the Pharisees and the Sadducees and all those guys. Now, my theme to you today is that Jesus was trained in astrology. In fact, Jesus was not a Neptune man here to show us all about Pisces and the age of Pisces. He was an Aquarian man. I've researched his chart intensely. I've spent years and years on it like Moby Dick did. And I found his chart because Moby didn't use secondary progressions, and I got very good at it. And Jesus was born on a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, and when the progressed midheaven went by that, it had to hit Jupiter first when he came out and said, "I'm the wise man." That's Jupiter. And then Saturn. So Jupiter hit when he was about age 30, and then when he was 35 or so, the progressed midheaven hit Saturn, and they killed him. Well, he knew that. He knew his own chart. So, there's a lot of proof to this, especially if you get into what Moby Dick has taught us, Don Jacobs. Don Jacobs wrote a book called Astrology's Pew in Church. And it wasn't quite finished when he died, but his son, J.H. Jacobs, very fine astrologer in San Francisco, finished it off and published it. So you might look up Astrology's Pew in Church by Don Jacobs. And you can get Moby's, I hope, anyway, his writings. So Jesus was, one of my favorite passages is where they're stoning the girl, you know, and they want to get Jesus in trouble. So these religious leaders say to Jesus, "Well, what would you do here?" Jesus stoops and draws in the dirt. Why is he doing that? Well, there was no paper in the Holy Lands in those days, so astrologers would take a stick and draw the chart in the dirt. Yes, I have pictures of Arab astrologers doing that. By the way, the Arabs were excellent at astrology. Europe pretty much went through the Dark Ages, and the religious fanatics burned witches for hundreds of years, and they stamped out all astrology and threw it in with devil's work. I mean, look what happened to the Mayans. When the fanatics, the Pope's fanatical people showed up, they took every book they could find and burned them. We have 6 or 7 left is all. They knew it was astrology, the work of the devil. Pretty much all my life I've been an astrologer, and I've been persecuted by religious people who are real righteous. They think astrology is the work of the devil. Pooey. Astrology is a sacred science. Jesus used it and knew it. And when he stooped and he drew in the dirt, for a while he stood up and he said, "Hey, you without sin cast the first stone." And everybody went gulp and went away. And he sat down and he drew in the dirt some more to study the chart. There's a lot more.